let's expand on potential trade options for the Devils. Who's untouchable and who should be packing their bags? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Also, I share my thoughts on Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed him. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Play announcer, Devils writer for Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. In the previous episode, I talked about the possibility of the New Jersey Devils acquiring Jacob Markstrom from the Calgary Flames via a trade. Reports are saying that the Devils are one of the frontrunners to land Markstrom alongside the Ottawa Senators and Toronto Maple Leafs. But here's the catch. Markstrom has waived his no movement clause to New Jersey only for the time being. And it seems like the relationship between him and the Flames front office is growing worse, and worse. That relationship is strained because he is not too happy with how they've been handling his trade circumstance, especially since he has a no movement clause. I expressed my opinions. I said this seems to be the most logical sense because other goalies that are probably available on the market are going to cost the Devils a pretty penny. And I went through some possible trade options, and I said that the Devils are running a little low in that regards because it's like, who do you sacrifice for Markstrom? Keep in mind, the Devils still need to get a few other assets in order to fulfill their roster, including getting a decent bottom six player, a grittier defenseman. But I wanted to go into more detail. Who's untouchable? Who's a bubble player? And if I had to bet, who's going to be on the way out in New Jersey? And that's what we're going to focus on in segment one. I will go through a list of Devils players, and I will give you guys my opinion as to why they are safe on the bubble or on the hot seat. Then in segment two, the Devils added somebody to their coaching staff. Former Blackhawks head coach Jeremy Colliton will join Sheldon Keefe's staff. And no, Dave Rogalski did not get fired. Sorry for anybody who wanted a different goaltender coach, but it is what it is. And then to round it all off in segment three, I watched Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final, and I must say, I'm a little concerned for the Edmonton Oilers, and I don't think Adam Henrique is getting his championship ring this year. All right, let's go through a list of players that are safe and players that might be on the hot seat. And this is courtesy of Cap Friendly. Like I said in the previous episode, I want to use Cap Friendly as much as I possibly can before the site goes dark next month. All right, here are some players that are safe on the forward end. Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier. All of those players are untouchable. They are beyond safe. Like if any team were to call Tom Fitzgerald and say, hey, can we ask about Jesper Bratt? Nope. Hang up the phone. Those players are safe. The next level to it are bubble players. Players that are not necessarily untouchable and in theory could be traded, but one or two things might happen. I don't foresee it taking place. Or two, their contract wouldn't allow them to be traded. As in, maybe teams wouldn't want to take on that sort of deal. And I think we know which player I'm referring to. Bubble players include Erik Haula, Curtis Lazar, and Andre Palat. One of the reasons why I think Erik Haula and Curtis Lazar are both safe, I kind of touched on it in the previous episode, is because they add some depth to the forward group. And what made the Devils so successful during the 2022-2023 season is that they just had depth all throughout their lineup. So like a line that I like to go back to, Nico Hischier, Tomas Tatar, and Dawson Mercer. Nico Hischier, he's the star player, and he is driving that line. Dawson Mercer, he's a bona fide scorer, and he can rack up the points, and he's not afraid to finish in front of the goaltender and try to get those dirty goals. And for Tomas Tatar, I don't think he got the credit he deserved. He was a pretty solid player, and he complemented Nico Hischier and Dawson Mercer pretty well. It goes to show you the amount of depth that the Devils have. And for Ondrej Palat, there is no team that is willing to take on his contract. Ondrej Palat is 33 years of age. He has a cap hit of $6 million, and he is guaranteed for 3 more seasons, and he has a no movement clause. The reason I am bringing this up is because on social media, I asked all of you, who are you willing to sacrifice in order to get Jacob Markstrom? And some people said Ondrej Palat, because what does he actually do? And we're going to talk about that in a future episode. I know a lot of people are frustrated with his contract. He seems to be the most polarizing and or controversial player on the Devils roster, just due to the fact that he's a little overpaid and he's a bottom 6 player and he's an alternate captain. The list goes on. But like it or not, Ondrej Palat is going to remain on the Devils roster. There is no possible outcome in which a team is going to accept an aging Ondrej Palat with 3 years remaining on his contract with a cap hit of $6 million and a no movement clause. Hang up the phone right away if you're the other 31 GMs. Ondrej Palat is staying. I would also have to throw in Dawson Mercer as a bubble player, because it seems like the Nashville Predators, in order for the Devils to get UC Saros, I think they are asking for Mercer, and I'm sure Tom Fitzgerald is not going to allow that to happen. Mercer has way too much untapped potential to just let him walk. And for Nathan Bastian, I've always said this, I'm a little unsure, because he did have an injury-riddled year. He is a depth asset, and he did play a big role during the 2022-2023 season. The thing is, he didn't really stick out in any particular category. But for the time being, both those players are bubble players. I don't foresee them getting traded at all, barring anything like miraculous or catastrophic happening. I think both of them are going to be on the Devils roster for the foreseeable future, and I think the Devils are going to try to hammer out an extension with Dawson Mercer. Seems like he enjoys New Jersey. Seems like the love is reciprocal. But for the time being, that's what I think of bubble players. Players that are not untouchable, but players that aren't exactly safe either. But I lean heavily towards them being on the Devils roster, with the exception of Ondrej Palat. But here's a player that could be available in trade discussions, and that is Alexander Holtz. I teased the fact that maybe you could bring up Alexander Holtz's name when discussing Jacob Markstrom, but here's my final offer for the Calgary Flames. If I had to offer them a package deal for Jacob Markstrom, I'm going to give him a 3rd-round draft pick in this year's draft, and also a prospect not named Seamus Casey or Lenny Haminaho. And you can always add a few other draft picks to entice it a little bit more. Who knows? Maybe the Flames will retain half of Markstrom's salary just to make it a little more simpler for the Devils. We don't really know. But I don't think Alexander Holtz is going to be an option in terms of trade pieces for Markstrom, especially since Markstrom is 34 years of age, has 2 years remaining on his deal. And the Flames already got a gem in Yegor Sharangovich when the Tyler Toffoli deal did not work out for New Jersey. I don't think Tom Fitzgerald is going to make the same mistake twice, because I've always said, wherever Alexander Holtz goes, he is going to thrive. And I am open to trading away Alexander Holtz, but it has to be for the right price. Here are my thoughts on Alexander Holtz. I don't think he is as bad as people are projecting him to be. Yes, he needs to work on his defense. Yes, he needs to work on his puck handling ability. And he's a pretty solid offensive contributor. But the thing is like, it doesn't seem like he's going to be given the role that people think he deserves. He's more of a filler at this point, and he's not really going to thrive in New Jersey, especially if the Devils are projected to be good next season, similar to Yegor Sharangovich. If I am Tom Fitzgerald, and if you are serious about getting a impact player, I would look to see what you could get for that 10th overall selection, and also Alexander Holtz, and just put some feelers out there. Personally, I think Alexander Holtz is on the hot seat. Last year, Tom Fitzgerald, Kevin Dineen, Lindy Ruff, they all sat down with Holtz and basically told him, you have to step up your game. Otherwise, the outcome is not going to look very good for you. And this season, sometimes he was benched, and sometimes he wasn't given the amount of ice time that people thought he deserved. And Tom Fitzgerald said during one of his press conferences that he didn't think that Alexander Holtz was having a good season. And that's the general manager. Honestly, I don't think the organization has high hopes for Alexander Holtz at this point. He is solid, nothing spectacular. Personally, I would just say, let it ride out, see what he can do. But I am open to trading him away because I thought he would have been included in the Timo Meier package just a year ago. We'll see what happens, but Alexander Holtz, that seat might be feeling a little warm for him. All right, let's look over to the defense. Untouchables, Dougie Hamilton and Luke Hughes. I think they are beyond safe. And the reason why I'm going to put Simon Nemec as a bubble player is because I think Nemec is going to be on the roster for the foreseeable future. I don't see an outcome in which the Devils do trade him away. I'd say 99 out of 100 times, there's no trade circumstance that I envision. However, somehow, some way, if Fitzgerald is given an offer that he cannot refuse, Nemec might be included in a package deal. Very, 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 very unlikely. I cannot reiterate that enough. Extremely, highly unlikely. But for some reason, I just have this feeling saying, okay, if the Devils are given a multi-time all-star and it's going to cost them Nemec, maybe they would bite on that. But I don't see it happening. I cannot make that any more clear. I do not want the Devils to trade Nemec. Keep him and develop him. John Marino, Jonas Siegenthaler, and Kevin Ball, similar to what I said in the previous episode, if you trade one of them away for a forward, you're just making your defense worse. And that was a big issue for New Jersey just this past season. I think it's in their best interest to hold on to whatever defensive assets they have and try to add more to it. One of the issues that the Devils had in terms of defense was depth. We saw Dougie Hamilton go out with an injury, Jonas Siegenthaler go out with an injury, and that really, really hurt the Devils' depth to the point where they had to bring up a few AHL players to save face. It doesn't make sense to trade Kevin Ball or John Marino for a goalie or a forward, because if you get a good goalie but you weaken your defense, doesn't that cancel each other out? It doesn't matter if you have a good goaltender in net. If you don't have strong defense, you're going to be screwed come playoff time. Forget playoff time. You're going to be screwed in the regular season because you have no depth. That's why I think the Devils should just hold on for what they got in terms of defensemen. All right, we're going to look at some AHL players that could be involved in a trade package. And obviously when it comes to goalies, it's a little more cut and dry. Kaapo Kähkönen, pending UFA, he might be gone. And Jake Allen, he has 1 year remaining on his deal. Montreal Canadiens are retaining half of his salary. There's no reason why the Devils would deal him away. Before we continue, I want to tell you guys about FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Final, and more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who you think is going to hit one out of the park, Shohei Ohtani. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summertime bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com and please remember to gamble responsibly. Okay, we're going to talk about Jeremy Colliton momentarily, but before we get to that, I made a list of AHL players that could see themselves in trade discussions. Keep in mind, some of them are pending RFAs, so this is not really official, but I'm sure something could get worked out. Some names that come to mind: Graham Clark, Nolan Foote, Nico Dawes, Akira Schmid, Seamus Casey, Lenny Haminaho, Brian Hallinan, and Santeri Hataka. I know I'm missing a few others, but just looking back at it, these are some players that could see themselves in trade discussions if and when that time comes. I said in the first segment, I'm not really all for trading Seamus Casey or Lenny Haminaho. Seamus Casey is an interesting case. You might have to convert him to a forward if there's no room for him. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to include him in trade discussions. He's still young, and you can still change his position for the time being because he sort of plays like a forward anyway. I saw it on full display at development camp. And then for Lenny Haminaho, Jersey Joe of Draft Pro Hockey, and also my colleague over at Pucks and Pitchforks, recurring guest on this show, he compared Lenny Haminaho to Tyler Toffoli. And Toffoli was pretty decent, if you ask me. I don't think the Devils would trade Lenny Haminaho. He wasn't a first-round selection in last year's draft, but he was the Devils' first selection in last year's draft. Because remember, the Devils lost their first-round draft pick due to the Timo Meier trade. Just putting that out there. But I think all the other prospects could see their names in discussion. When it comes to Jacob Markstrom, maybe the Flames would ask for a goalie in return. Akira Schmid, he showed some bright spots, especially in the first series against the New York Rangers in last year's playoffs. That could be an option. Or Nico Dawes, he was pretty solid this season. Kind of crashed and burned, but he was a little overworked, if we're being completely honest. It's interesting, but just putting some ideas out there. Remember, I have no final say on this. You can draw your own conclusions. I'm not saying these players should be traded. I'm just throwing some ideas out if the Devils are serious about shape-shifting the roster. However, I do want to say the prospect pool for the Devils, it's getting less and less. The Devils had, like a top 10 prospect pool just a couple seasons ago. I think it's in the bottom tier of the league right now, especially with all the trades they've made recently, including the Timo Meier deal. They had to give up, like 3 or so prospects that were promising. They didn't have a first-round selection in last year's draft. It's getting a little small. All right, let's move on and talk about Jeremy Colliton. Yesterday, it was announced that the Devils named Jeremy Colliton as an assistant coach, and he will join Sheldon Keefe's staff. Colliton completes the on-ice coaching staff, which includes fellow assistants Ryan McGill, Chris Taylor, Sergey Breland, and goaltending coach Dave Rogalski. I am so sorry yet again. The announcement was made by President and General Manager Tom Fitzgerald. Colliton was most recently head coach for the Vancouver Canucks AHL affiliate for the past 2 seasons. In his 2 regular seasons at the helm, he posted identical records of 40, 25, and 7 and led them to the Calder Cup playoffs. Colliton also had head coaching experience in the NHL, serving as a head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks for parts of 4 seasons from 2018 to 2022. At the time of his hiring, he was the youngest coach in NHL, and over his tenure, guided the Blackhawks to a record of 87, 92, and 26, which gave him a .488 points percentage. Yeesh. At the time of his hiring by the Blackhawks on November 6, 2018, Colliton was coaching his second season with their AHL affiliate in Rockford. In 2017-2018, his first season with Rockford, the team advanced to the Western Conference Finals. Colliton finished with a record of 46-31-0-11 in 88 games with the IceHogs. A native of Blackie, Alberta, the New York Islanders selected Colliton in the second round, 58th overall in the 2003 NHL draft. He played 6 seasons in the Islanders organization at the NHL and AHL levels from 2005 through 2012. The center scored 3 goals and 3 assists in 57 career NHL games, and while in the AHL with Bridgeport, he scored 203 points in 326 AHL games. Colliton represent his home country at the 2003 World Junior Under-18 Championships, 1 gold, 2004 World Junior Championship, 1 gold as well, and 2005 World Juniors. This time, he got silver. All right, here are my thoughts on Colliton. If you actually look up on YouTube, the Blackhawks fan base booed him mercilessly at times because he wasn't really doing a good job with the Blackhawks in their eyes, but he was the youngest head coach in the NHL. I don't know what you really expect from him. I think it's an interesting hire, and he should be an interesting fit. I'm intrigued. I'll say that. And since he's a relatively young guy, I think the young players will relate to him in some sort of capacity. All right, before we close out today's show and I talk about the Stanley Cup Final, let me tell you about Policygenius. Policygenius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit with their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Okay. I've actually been enjoying talking about the Stanley Cup Final on this show. And hopefully one day I could talk about the Stanley Cup Final in which the Devils were a part of it and not reminisce over something that happened 20 years ago. Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final saw the Oilers get shut out. But theoretically, I'm sure if you were to look at the deserve to win-o-meter, I'm just guessing, I think it fell into the favor of the Oilers because it seemed like the Oilers did outplay the Panthers, but Sergei Bobrovsky was just very strong in between the pipes. Fast forward to Game 2. The Panthers take a 2-0 lead, and the last team to overcome a 2-0 deficit and win the Stanley Cup was the Boston Bruins back in 2011. And I am very concerned for this Oilers team. And I am trying to root for them just because Adam Henrique, former Devil, likable guy, deserves a championship under his belt. Connor McDavid, ESPN compared his first Stanley Cup run to 2011, 2012 LeBron James. As you guys know, big basketball fan, big LeBron James fan. And fast forward to 2024, LeBron is better than Jordan. Yes, you heard me correctly. No, I will not take it back. I stand on business. But going back to Connor McDavid, all-time great players deserve one championship under their belt. And I even said this during my prediction that Connor McDavid most likely is going to have to wait. At this point, the Oilers have no even strength goals. No forward, including McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, you name it, has scored. And they have to try to win 4 of the next 5 games. That's going to be a very tall order for them to do. The Panthers are just a very gritty team, and they just know how to play bully-style hockey, and this is something that the Devils could learn from the Panthers. Look at how playing aggressive can get you. And I was talking to Chico Resch about this recently. Can this Devils team, if they are inserted into the playoffs, can they withstand some of these physical teams? And for right now, the answer is no. This Devils team is not all that physical, and they need to work on their aggression just a tad bit more, especially if someone's coming after one of your star players. And speaking of which, I'm curious to see what the aftermath is going to be like for Leon Draisaitl after he landed an elbow on Alexander Barkov, the captain for the Panthers. And I am crossing my fingers for Barkov to return to the championship action. I am hoping for the best. But going back to the Panthers in general, their forechecking is really good. They're very aggressive. They know how to outbully you. At times, they know how to outskate one of the greatest players to ever play this game, and that is Connor McDavid. The Oilers went up 1-0, and after that, it was just a barrage of goals for the Panthers as they scored 4 unanswered goals. And I told you guys, the defense was going to be a concern for me for the Oilers. Their goaltending was going to be a concern. I wasn't really concerned about their offense, but their offense is not really all that good right now. I am sticking by what I said. Panthers in 6 could be a lot sooner. We'll see what happens. The series heads up north to Canada in Edmonton, Alberta. Maybe they could get something to be excited for because Connor McDavid didn't even know how to answer the question, what's to do in Edmonton. But jokes aside, yeah, this Panthers team, barring anything catastrophic happening, I expect for them to hoist up the Stanley Cup. And Dmitry Kulikov, he's on the Panthers roster. He's a former Devil. Just throwing that out there. So maybe we'll see a former Devil hoist the Stanley Cup after all. But I am sticking by my guns. Panthers in 6. Could be a lot sooner. We'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you think is untouchable, a bubble player, or on the hot seat for the Devils in terms of trade discussions? And what do you think of Jeremy Colliton, who used to be one of the youngest head coaches in the NHL, and now he is a part of Sheldon Keefe's staff? And what are your thoughts heading into Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final? I'm enjoying these talks, and it's actually a little refreshing to talk about a couple other teams not surrounding the Devils. I miss doing post-game recaps, so I'm still going to have to wait till October. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.